My name is Liana Cortez. I'm 26 years old. My boyfriend once looked me straight in the eye and said, "Fine, if you don't like it, find someone else." I remember the way his jaw tightened, the way he expected me to back down like I always did. What he didn't expect was my answer. "Already did," I told him, and watched the expression melt off his face like wax under a blowtorch. But that moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of 3 years of me slowly realizing I was sharing my relationship with a woman I'd never agreed to compete with. Ethan and I had been together for 3 years when he started getting comfortable. Too comfortable. The kind of comfortable where he thought it was totally fine to invite his ex-girlfriend, Delan, to our anniversary dinner because we're just friends now. Whenever I questioned their late-night texting sessions, he'd roll his eyes and say I was overreacting. "You're being paranoid, Lee. She's practically like a sister to me." Sisters do not send selfies in low lighting at midnight with captions like, "Miss these talks." But I kept that observation to myself. If I'm being honest, the signs had been there from the very beginning. From the first month we started dating, Delan was the ghost at every feast, the name that slipped into every story about his past. When we first got serious, Ethan would tell me about their crazy connection, how they were soulmates who broke up because of timing, not feelings. He painted her as the one who got away, the almost perfect life he would have had if the universe had cooperated. I should have run then. But Ethan was magnetic, the kind of man who could make a room bend around him when he laughed. When we were alone, he had this way of looking at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. When someone looks at you like that, you convince yourself that you've won, that you're the one he chose over all the others, even the legendary ex. The first real red flag came at our 6-month anniversary. We were at this little Italian place downtown, candles between us, my favorite dress, the whole cliché. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his whole face lit up in a way it hadn't for me all evening. "Delan got a promotion," he said, turning the phone so I could see the message like I should be equally thrilled. "That's nice," I replied, stabbing my pasta a little too hard. Why was his ex sending him career updates at 9 p.m. on our date night? "I should call her to celebrate," he said, already reaching for the call button. "Right now? During our anniversary dinner?" He frowned at me like I was being unreasonable. "It'll just be 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes stretched into 20. I sat there eating cooling pasta while he leaned back in his chair, laughing into the phone, sharing inside jokes I wasn't a part of, congratulating another woman on her success in the middle of our romantic evening. When he finally hung up, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Sorry, baby. She was just so excited to tell me first." "Why you specifically?" I asked. "We're close friends. We tell each other everything." That should have been my first clue that I wasn't really dating Ethan. I was dating the placeholder he kept around until he decided whether Delan still wanted him. By our first-year anniversary, the pattern was well established. Delan would text during our dates. He'd interrupt our conversations to respond instantly, thumb hovering over her chat like it was urgent. When we went out with his friends, half the evening was spent updating everyone on DLNA's latest drama, her breakups, her new job, her family issues, her crazy stories. "You talk about her a lot," I said one night after he'd spent an hour analyzing why Delan's latest relationship had crashed and burned. "She's going through a hard time," he said defensively. "Good friends support each other." "Do you talk to her about me this much?" I asked. The pause before he answered told me everything. "That's different. You two don't know each other." What he meant was, Delan's life was interesting in ways mine wasn't. Her problems demanded his full emotional attention. My concerns were background noise. I convinced myself I was just being insecure. Ethan was handsome, ambitious, the kind of man other women checked out when we walked into a restaurant. If he was with me instead of her, that had to mean something, right? Our second year was when everything started to twist into something uglier. Delan moved back to our city after grad school, taking a job at some sleek tech company downtown. Suddenly, the mysterious friend became a real physical presence. Ethan started mentioning coffees, quick catch-ups, helping her pick out furniture for her new apartment. "I should meet her," I said after he spent an entire Saturday assembling her bookshelves while I spent the day alone. "If she's such a big part of your life." "You'll love her," he said easily. His eyes, however, flickered away, as if he was more worried about whether she'd love me. When I finally did meet Delanne at a group happy hour, I understood the tension immediately. She was everything I'd heard: tall, luminous, outrageously charming. She walked into the bar like she owned the air, and the room rearranged itself around her. They had that easy rhythm of people who'd shared years together, unfinished jokes, ridiculous stories only they understood, a private language of glances. The worst part wasn't her, it was him. Watching Ethan around her was like watching a different man. He was funnier, sharper, more alive. He leaned in when she spoke, laughed from his chest, told stories with his whole body. I watched him transform in her presence, and this cold realization settled in my stomach. This was the version of him she got, the one he had been with her. With me, he was calmer, quieter. Stable, he'd call it. Boring, I started to fear. That night, as we got ready for bed, I stared at him brushing his teeth and finally said, "You're different around her." He spit, rinsed, avoided my eyes. Different how? Happier. Lighter. More yourself. He was quiet for a moment. She brings out a playful side of me. We have history. And I don't bring that out in you? I asked, heart pounding. He shrugged. You bring out other things. Stability, comfort. Stability, comfort. The words every woman dreams of hearing from the man she loves, right? It felt less like a compliment and more like a verdict. I should have ended it then. But I was 26 and convinced that real love meant fighting for someone, proving you were the better choice, earning the kind of effortless devotion he seemed to give Delanne without trying. So I doubled down. I tried to be more spontaneous, more fun, more chill. I planned surprise dates, weekend getaways, learned his favorite recipes. None of it seemed to land. He'd roll his eyes when I showed up with flowers, joke that I was being extra when I set up a cozy movie night. Meanwhile, Delanne could send a single meme and he'd be doubled over laughing, texting her back for 20 minutes. The breaking point should have been our second anniversary trip to wine country. I'd saved for months to afford the cabin, the tastings, the couple's massage. It was supposed to be our reset button, our romantic proof that we were still worth the effort. 2 days before we left, Ethan called me, voice heavy. Delanne's grandma is in the hospital, he said. She's a wreck. I told her we could talk while we're driving up. She really needs me right now. Can she not call one of her many other friends? I asked quietly. This is our weekend. You're being selfish, Lee. Her grandmother might be dying. That weekend, his body was with me, but his attention never was. At dinner, he kept stepping outside to take her calls. In bed, his phone would light up at 1 a.m., and he'd whisper, I just need to check on her. Meanwhile, when my own grandmother had died 6 months earlier, he'd sent flowers and given me a quick hug before heading out to drinks with coworkers. He hadn't spent hours on the phone walking me through my grief. He hadn't researched hospitals or offered to drive me anywhere. That was when the difference finally clicked into focus. I was his girlfriend, but she was his priority. I lay awake in that overpriced cabin, listening to him murmur comfort into the phone for another woman, and something inside me quietly snapped. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't pack my bags in the middle of the night. I just stared at the ceiling and admitted one brutal truth to myself. If I stayed, this would never change. And if something was going to change, it would have to start with me. By the time autumn settled over the city, something inside me had started to wither. I wasn't ready to admit it out loud yet, but I knew. I knew Ethan had never stopped loving Delanne, not in the way that mattered. And I knew I had slowly, painfully become the emotional understudy in my own relationship. I wasn't the main character. I was the fallback option, the just in case, the safe one, the steady one, the one he didn't have to fight for. I kept hoping things would shift, that Ethan would wake up one day and see me with the same intensity he saw her. But hope, I was learning, has teeth, and it bites hardest when you cling to it the longest. Then Delanne moved back permanently. Suddenly, she wasn't just a distant echo or a name that floated around our conversations. She was a real presence, a physical orbit, a gravitational force pulling him in ways I could never match. Babe, I'm grabbing coffee with Delanne after work, he'd say casually, like saying he was picking up milk. She's nervous about starting her new job. Or, she texted me about her presentation today. I told her I'd run it with her real quick. Or the worst. I'm going to swing by her apartment and help her with her new desk. She kind of messed up the bolts. Every time a tiny piece of me crumbled. I didn't say anything. I told myself I wasn't going to be that girlfriend, the jealous one, the insecure one, the controlling one. But in reality, I just didn't want to lose him. One Saturday, he spent the entire day helping her decorate her new place, hanging curtains, arranging shelves, advising her on paint color. Things we had never even done together because he always said he hated that domestic stuff. When he returned home with paint on his hands and a bright smile that had nothing to do with me, I knew it was time. I want to meet her, I said that night. He froze for half a second, barely long enough for me to notice, but long enough. Okay, he said too quickly. Sure, it'll be fun. Fun! That was not the word for what followed. We met at a group happy hour so it wouldn't feel like a confrontation. She walked into the bar wearing a sunlit smile, hair perfectly tousled, outfit effortless in a way that made me suddenly conscious of every detail of my own clothes. She hugged Ethan first, a long, warm, familiar hug. Then she turned to me. You must be Liana, she said brightly, like she'd been waiting years to meet me. I've heard so much about you. But the way she glanced at our joined hands, just a flicker, barely noticeable, told me everything. She wasn't happy we were together. She wasn't neutral. She was measuring me, and in her eyes I was coming up short. Throughout the evening, Ethan became a version of himself I rarely got to see. Unrestrained, animated, fully alive. He leaned in when she spoke, laughed with his whole chest, and told stories like they were performing for an audience of two. Their rhythm was flawless, their energy was intoxicating, their chemistry was unmistakable. I sat there smiling politely, feeling like the ghost in their love story. That night, as we got ready for bed, I said it softly. You're different around her. He paused mid-brush, toothbrush hanging from his lips. Different how? You're lighter, happier, more you. He rinsed and stared at the sink. She brings out a playful side. We have history. And I don't bring that out in you? You bring out other things. Like what? Stability, comfort. I tried to swallow that like a compliment. It felt like being told, you're the safe option. She's the one I come alive for. I should have walked away right then. But I didn't. I stayed. I tried harder. I planned spontaneous dates and surprised him with little things he used to like. I bought tickets to a concert he'd mentioned months ago. I cooked his favorite meals. I left sweet notes in his coat pocket. He barely noticed. Meanwhile, Dilan could send a simple late-night meme and he'd light up like the 4th of July. Then came my birthday. I'd rented a small A-frame cabin 2 hours north. It was supposed to be a romantic reset, quiet hiking trails, a cozy fireplace, the ring I'd spent 3 months saving for tucked in my sock drawer at home. He never even made it out of the city. 2 hours before we were supposed to leave, he called me. His tone was gentle, too gentle. Baby, I invited Dilan to the cabin. My heart dropped into my stomach. What? I whispered. She's going through a horrible breakup. She's devastated. I can't just leave her alone right now. You invited your ex to my birthday weekend? Don't be selfish, he said, the same tone he used when I questioned their midnight calls. This is bigger than your birthday. My birthday. The same birthday he'd forgotten last year. The same birthday he almost canceled because Dilan had a work crisis. I sat on my bed staring at the engagement ring I'd been planning to give him, a ring I'd convinced myself could fix things, make him choose me fully, make our love real in a way that matched the fantasy he seemed to be living in his memories. Fine, I said quietly, feeling something break inside me. Go with her. Baby. I hope you have a wonderful time. He didn't fight me. He hung up, sent a quick text, and left. I watched their cabin photos on social media later that night. Him laughing, her leaning on his shoulder, s'mores by the fire, hiking trails, sunrise breakfasts. Everything I had planned for us. Only she was there. And she looked happy. Genuinely, beautifully happy. With my boyfriend. The comments were worse. You two are so cute together. When are you getting back together? Power couple forever. No one asked where I was. No one even seemed to remember I existed. That's when the truth hit with brutal clarity. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was the stability he kept until she became available again. That weekend, I finally reached out to Marcus, my old friend from college, the one who'd once admitted he had feelings for me, but stepped back because I was in a relationship. The one Ethan had always been oddly jealous of, even though he pretended not to care. I saw the photos, Marcus said when he answered my call. You okay? No, I said honestly, I'm not. Come meet me, he said, no hesitation. Let's walk. Let's talk. We spent the afternoon strolling through the city, talking about everything but Ethan. For the first time in years, someone asked me about my dreams, my thoughts, my day. Someone looked at me, not past me, not through me, not over his shoulder, waiting for someone better to walk into the room. When Marcus looked at me, I felt seen. That night, he walked me to my building. Before I could say goodbye, he gently cupped my face and kissed me, soft, certain, without urgency. A warmth bloomed in my chest. It was the first time in months I'd felt something other than emptiness. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I don't want you to stop, I whispered back. And just like that, everything began to shift. The first thing I saw when I walked into Ethan's apartment a week later wasn't his face or the mess he'd left on the kitchen counter. It was the glow of his laptop screen, still open on the coffee table, a message thread, my name in bold, and a preview of a sentence that squeezed my chest until it hurt. I'll leave Liana when the timing feels right. My hand trembled as I set down my keys. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew snooping meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It pulls you by the throat. I stepped closer. The tab was already open, already staring at me like a wound. All I had to do was swipe up the trackpad. So I did, and the world I'd been clinging to collapsed in one clean motion. There it was, months of messages between Ethan and Delanne, paragraphs of emotional intimacy that made my stomach twist, complaints about our relationship, jokes at my expense, wistful memories of their past romance, and the worst part, plans. Soft, implied, but unmistakably there. Messages like, you know I miss you. You're the one I should have fought for. Being with her feels safe, but not right. I think about what we could have been if we never broke up. And her replies, then maybe it's time to fix that mistake. I still want you. I always have. Just don't leave her yet. She's too fragile. Too fragile. They were planning my heartbreak like someone planning a dinner reservation. My vision blurred as I scrolled, but I forced myself to keep reading. I needed the truth. Ugly, painful, undeniable. Then I saw it. From last night, Ethan, I wish I could be with you instead. Delanne, then leave her. Ethan, soon. I just need to find the right moment. So that was the truth. They weren't waiting for the universe to line up. They were waiting for convenience, for timing, for when breaking my heart would cause the least amount of guilt. Something inside me, something soft and hopeful, died right then. And something else, something stronger, took its place. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and calmly screenshotted everything. Every message, every confession, every plan. My hands were shaking, but my mind was startlingly clear. For the first time in months, I felt awake. When Ethan came home later that evening, humming to himself, grocery bags in his hands, he didn't notice my packed suitcase by the door. Hey, babe, he called casually. Could you help me put these? He froze when he saw my face. Lee, what's wrong? I didn't say anything. I simply held up my phone. His smile faltered. What's that? You tell me, I said, opening the screenshot album and tilting the screen toward him. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost impressive. I can explain. You don't need to, I said softly. You already did. In these messages, over and over again. Liana, please. No, I whispered. You don't get to please me anymore. He took a step towards me, reaching out like he could fix this with a touch. It wasn't like that. I was confused. You were planning your exit strategy, I said calmly. Planning how to break up with me gently. Planning how to transition back into her arms. Planning how to leave me without feeling guilty. That's not... And yet, I said, cutting him off, you still thought I would cook for you, wait for you, love you, trust you. You thought I would stay steady while you figured out when you wanted to destroy me. He swallowed hard. Lee, you're overreacting. I laughed, soft, disbelieving. You know what's funny? That sentence, right there. That's why this was so easy for you. You always thought my emotions were inconveniences you could tone down with a single word. Baby, please. Don't call me that. He flinched. Who told you? He asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Did Delanne? No one told me, I said. You left your laptop open. His eyes closed, a long, defeated exhale. He followed me as I walked toward the door. Where are you going? To someone who actually wants me, I said simply. His jaw clenched. Who? Before I could answer, there was a knock behind him. 3 soft taps. He turned. I didn't have to. I already knew. He opened the door, And there stood Marcus, hair windblown, a hoodie thrown over his shoulders, eyes warm and steady like a sunrise after a storm. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. Ethan stared between us, disbelief melting into ugly shock. "Are you kidding me? Him? The guy you told me not to worry about?" "You should have worried," I said quietly, "the moment you started treating me like an option." Marcus stepped inside, picking up one of my packed boxes with an ease that felt symbolic. "Don't worry," he told Ethan calmly. "Nothing happened until she walked away." That was the truth. I didn't cheat on Ethan. I simply stopped letting him cheat me out of a life where I felt chosen. As we carried the last box out, Ethan grabbed my arm, not hard, just desperate. "Liana, please, I love you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I had spent 3 years trying to save, trying to earn, trying to prove myself worthy of. But love shouldn't be a competition, and I was tired of competing. "No," I said gently. "You love the comfort I gave you, the stability, the predictability. You never loved me the way you loved her, and you know it." He dropped his hand. "I didn't want to hurt you," he whispered. "Then why were you planning to?" I asked softly. "Why did you stay, Ethan? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" His silence was answer enough. He didn't leave me because losing me cost him something. He didn't choose her because choosing her made him brave. He just didn't want to be alone while he figured himself out. I deserve better than that. And finally I knew it. As I stepped into the hallway, Marcus handed me my jacket and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded once. "Yeah, I think I finally am." We walked out into the cool evening air, quiet, steady, certain. For the first time in 3 years, my heart felt light. Not because I'd found someone new, but because I'd finally stopped holding on to someone who was never holding me back. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gently resting over mine, as if grounding me, but not claiming me. The soft hum of the engine felt strangely comforting, like a lullaby after a long, chaotic storm. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. I stared at the blur of streetlights flashing through the window and tried to breathe in this unfamiliar feeling. Relief. Relief so profound it almost hurt. "Do you want to talk?" Marcus finally asked, voice low and steady. "No," I said honestly, "not yet." He nodded, squeezing my hand once. "Okay, when you're ready." That was the thing about him. He never rushed me, never pushed, never tried to fill silence just to make himself feel better. He gave me space without abandoning me. Something Ethan had never understood. When we reached his apartment, the same place we'd ended our long walk weeks ago, he carried my boxes inside while I stood in the entryway, suddenly overwhelmed. This wasn't supposed to be my life. Not today. Not like this. Marcus paused, setting a box down gently. "Liana," he said softly, "you don't have to decide anything tonight. You don't have to stay. You don't have to leave. You don't owe me anything." I felt tears sting my eyes. "I know," I whispered. "That's why I feel safe here." The next few weeks were a quiet unraveling of everything I thought I knew about love. With Ethan, love had been something I chased, something I worked for, earned, fought for, begged for. A constant audition where I hoped the judge would finally lift up the sign that said, "You're enough." With Marcus, love flowed without effort. He cooked with me in the kitchen, laughing whenever I burned something, joking about our future recipes. He walked me to work on days when I didn't trust myself not to spiral back into old habits. He held me on the sofa without needing to fix anything. He let me cry, let me be silent, let me breathe. He saw me, not as a placeholder or a safety net, but as someone worth choosing simply because he wanted to. The contrast was startling, painful, healings, revealing. One night, as we were washing dishes together, he looked at me with this quiet sincerity that made my heart wobble. "You don't have to pretend you're over him yet," he said gently. "Healing doesn't happen in straight lines." I rested my hands on the edge of the sink. "I think I'm more over who I thought he was than who he actually is." Marcus dried his hands and leaned back against the counter. "And who did you think he was?" "The person he only became around her," I said softly. "The person I kept trying to bring back." Marcus nodded. "You can't compete with a version of someone that never existed." He was right. Ethan wasn't cruel. He wasn't evil. He wasn't heartless. He was just selfish in the way people become when they know you won't leave. And I had stayed far too long. 2 months after I moved in with Marcus, I got a notification I didn't expect. A message from Dylan. It was long, emotional, messy, full of half apologies and self-pity. She said Ethan had tried to pursue her after I left, but once again, she'd realized he wasn't who she remembered. He wasn't what she wanted. He wasn't the fantasy she'd held on to for so long. She ended with, "For what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt you. I hope you're okay." I read it twice, 3 times, then put my phone face down. Marcus walked over, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You don't have to respond," he said. "I'm not going to," I replied. "She wasn't the villain. She was just lost, like I was." "Do you forgive her?" "Yes," I said slowly, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I want her in my life." He kissed my forehead. "That's the healthiest thing I've ever heard you say." Meanwhile, Ethan tried to reach out too. A text, a call, a long email. He wanted closure, apologies, explanations. He wanted to convince me he had made a mistake, that he loved me, that he could change. But loving someone doesn't always mean they're right for you. And someone being sorry doesn't undo years of making you feel small. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because the door was finally closed. And for the first time in my life, it felt locked from the inside. A year later, Marcus took me on a hike, the same trail where we'd shared our first honest conversation. He held my hand the whole way, letting me set the pace, letting me choose the path. When we reached the eucalyptus grove overlooking the water, he stopped, turned to me, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. My breath caught. "Liana," he said softly, "I don't want to replace your past. I just want to build your future, with you, not around you." Tears blurred my vision. "I choose you," he whispered, "every day, in every version of life." He opened the box. Inside was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. Simple, elegant, nothing performative or flashy, just sincere, solid, intentional. Everything Ethan's love had never been. "Yes," I said instantly, shaking, crying, smiling all at once. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He laughed, kissed me, and slipped the ring onto my finger. It felt like coming home. Our wedding, 8 months later, was small, intimate, and overflowing with joy. Not the showy, performative joy people curate for photos, but the deep kind, the peaceful kind, the kind that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. As Marcus and I danced under the string lights, he whispered, "Thank you for choosing yourself. That's how you found me." I held him tighter. "Thank you," I whispered, "for choosing me before I even knew I deserved it." 5 years passed like a gentle tide, carrying us into a life we built together, steady, loving, honest. Marcus started his own architecture firm. I climbed into a leadership role at work. We adopted a dog. We traveled. We argued sometimes, but we always came back to each other, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And then, one warm spring morning, we welcomed our daughter. We named her Hope, because that's what loving Marcus had given me, because that's what choosing myself had restored, because that's what leaving Ethan had allowed me to rediscover. Not the brittle kind of hope that hurts to hold, but the soft, steady kind that grows roots. Sometimes I think back to the night Ethan snapped at me. "Fine, if you don't like it, find someone else." He meant it as a threat, but it became the best advice I was ever given. Because I did find someone else. Someone who didn't treat me like a placeholder. Someone who didn't make me compete for scraps of affection. Someone who wasn't waiting for another woman to choose him. I found a man who loved me first. Loved me fully. Loved me freely. And I have never, not for 1 second, looked back.